Hello everybody, my name is Cameron Roberts. I'm the Digital and Community Editor here at m.i.c.e Media. I want to welcome you all to this webinar, Hybrid to Digital, why choose between physical and digital when you can have the best of both. It's going to be a really exciting discussion on how to do hybrid, who attends hybrid, some best practices, and hopefully a little sneak peek at what the next steps are for hybrid events. I'm joined by Kevin Lorch, who is the Managing Director of EventsCase, and yeah, we're going to be having a discussion about all things hybrid today. How are you doing, Kevin?
Yeah, good, thanks, Cameron. You?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. I'm very well indeed. So I guess to kick things off, Kevin, really, give me a little bit of an intro about you, where you fit in kind of the event space, and I guess let everyone know who's watching, why they should listen to you about hybrid events, really.
Sure. Okay, so EventsCase, we are a event technology company that's been around for 8 to 9 years now. Typically, and before COVID, we were out there to service our clients with what we call an all-in-one platform for all bits of tech they would need for their physical events. So that would be from event websites to registration to on-site check-in, facilitating check-in, to event apps, and of course post-event in terms of analysing the effectiveness with the analytics. How we've sort of ventured into the hybrid world is the same as anyone else, really. At the end of the day, it's come from our clients' needs. Over the last 18 months, the event industry has changed. Clients have needed other types of technologies, and we've listened to them, adapted the platform to support essentially them being able to run their events moving forward. Now, of course, things are changing more. We are seeing an increase in physical demand again, and we're going back to that, but there's always some element at the moment of digital involved, and really we've enhanced the platform just to be able to support all of that.
Great. It sounds like you're in a good position to speak to the topic then. I mean, just to get out of the way really early, and I understand this is a really broad question, but I think something that muddies the waters with these sorts of conversations is that everyone has a very different perception of what a hybrid event actually is. So I figure just to make things a little bit easier going forward, I guess, what's your definition of a hybrid event?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm exactly the same. As I think it can be a variety of different things. And again, we're not event managers, we're event technology. So if someone comes to us sort of saying, look, I need to run this hybrid event and this is what it looks like, we're not going to say that's not a hybrid event. So, I listen to our clients that will say a hybrid event is a way a lot of our clients look at it is we're going to have live attendees and we're going to have virtual attendees having a similar sort of experience. But of course, it could be that we have all virtual attendees, but the panels are together live in a studio. That, in essence, could be a hybrid event. You could speak to somebody that has a hybrid event portfolio, which is a mix of virtual and live events, which I think was the sort of thing that a lot of organizations were doing pre-COVID. In terms of the technology, the technology very much supports all of these. The majority, I would suggest, is that we are supporting our clients where they are having a live event and then offering a digital aspect for the attendees that don't want to be on site or can't be on site. But yeah, we're not clearly defining it in any specific way.
I guess my question on the back of that would be, you talk about the differentiator between those organisers that want to do a hybrid event because they want to do a hybrid event, and those that are sort of almost, it sounds like there's some that are sort of funded into it. Maybe they have an international audience. Yep. So doing a live event is basically impossible. I mean, what's the ratio there, and what are kind of the unique challenges to having like almost a willing organiser who wants to do a hybrid and sort of someone who's being dragged kicking and screaming into the hybrid events?
Well, look, if you think back sort of 18 months or when all of this started, I think predominantly not so much hybrid, the virtual came about really because a lot of event organisers, everything got put on hold, and then it was a case of, okay, we've got our content, we want to get it out there, how are we going to go about doing it? We don't want to run a webinar, we want to run something that mimics an event, has the networking aspect, has everything included, and how can we do that? And obviously there's a number of different technologies that support that, ours being one of them. It's still difficult to say how many are coming to us specifically wanting to run hybrid, and how many are looking at running a physical event, but then adding a bit of contingency for those attendees that can't come. I mean, obviously, you look at the UK, and it's still really, really difficult for international travel. So we are going to consistently see event organisers looking to plan, but wanting to add some sort of hybrid aspect into it. So it is really, really difficult to say where it falls. We certainly are recognising that there are organisations out there that say, you know what, we want to stick with this. We want to stick with it. We want to always offer some digital side. But then you can look on LinkedIn and you can look elsewhere where some are saying it's falling off. It's not going to happen at all. And we're going to go back to physical. I mean, probably onto something that we'll touch on in a bit. From our experience, what we are seeing, and from those organisers we're speaking to that are fully embracing it, they are essentially saying that there's a whole new audience out there. There's people out there that would never have attended our events that are attending our events now because they can do so in a digital fashion.
I mean, yeah, that leads me on very well to kind of, I guess, my next point really, which is about the audience and about, you know, in your experience, who actually attends a hybrid event? I guess from both the virtual and the physical side. I think that the only really quantifiable thing that anyone can say about a virtual audience is that you might be able to get more internationals there because no travel. But I mean, in your experience, what's the attendee profile like?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I think even before all of this started, there were some people that, you know, really, really enjoyed the live experience, and there's maybe some that didn't. I mean, you really take it down to, I don't know, using different analogies, something like shopping. You know, there's some people that love shopping. They go out and they go to the shops and they want to walk through the shops and they want to feel the clothes, they want to do shopping. There's people like me that never want to go into a shop ever again and are happy to do everything online. And I think there was still that type of thing in the events world. Okay, there's the whole, look, face to face. We really want to network with people. And there's certain events, I think, that are always going to lend itself to that. But you also can experience events, and we've all probably been there, where there's a bunch of exhibitors and you're walking down those sort of walkways in these halls, and you've got overzealous salespeople like me trying to grab people off, trying to talk to them, force their products down the neck onto them. And not everyone wants that. So there's the type of attendee that wants to pick and choose, do things in their own time, doesn't necessarily want to do it right then over those 2 days or at that specific time. And we're recognizing that that is maybe a newer audience. And some would say that maybe it was the older audience that was so used to a physical event and actually the face-to-face. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's just different characteristics and what different type of people want. And now we're also in a situation where it can change really, really quickly. We might be saying, you know what, I'm going to go to this event this time next week, and then something changes, whether or not that's because of COVID or anything else. And having the option to do it in a digital world, you know, it is a great option to have out there. I was only speaking to someone this morning that's running an event within, I think it's within the next month, that has put out to the group of attendees already who wants to attend live, who wants to attend digitally, and who doesn't actually mind. And I think that 60% are actually sort of looking at doing this on a virtual side rather than live. Now, obviously, that's one type of audience. You might find you do that with a different event, it's a completely different type of audience, and the numbers get changed. So I think it's really, really difficult to say that this is the type of people, because it's going to completely depend on the type of event as well.
I wonder if, does seniority play a kind of a role in sort of split between a virtual and a physical audience? So I can sort of see, you know, you're talking a lot about things change, and virtual audiences, obviously it's easier for them to come in as they want to, and they can come from their desk and they don't have to be away from emails for 7 hours or however long it is. So I can see how someone in the C-suite, for example, that might work for them. However, on the other hand, being at a physical event, you're a presence there, right? And people say, oh, I met this person, this CEO, this CMO, this MD, etc. So, I mean, where does seniority play in kind of that split?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's really difficult for us to say because we're from the technology side of things. And I would suggest it's, again, going to be very, very different depending on the type of event. It's also depending on, for example, if we're looking at selling at these events. If we're selling SaaS software, then it's really, really easy to demonstrate SaaS software online. If we're there talking to people about buying a 747, how do you demonstrate that? And what it can do in a digital world. And yes, seniority might be a difference as well, but you also might go down the route of saying that maybe a C-suite doesn't have the time, or maybe they'd rather fit everything into one day than having to sort of plan their day and have all the distractions at their desk. So I think it's something that no one can answer unless you're talking about a specific event for a specific target audience, and then to analyze the data to say that these are the type of people that we had that were virtual and these are the type of people that we had that were live.
Makes sense. I mean, kind of on the technology side then, that's obviously where kind of your bread and butter is. When you're talking about different types of people who attend these events, what technologies do you guys, or should the industry as a whole, be implementing to really bring in this new hybrid audience? I mean, it's very easy to say we're just going to stream this panel. But
yeah.
What makes it a bit more sexy?
Well, I think the first thing is when we started looking, or certainly from my perspective, when we started looking at what a virtual attendee is, the virtual attendee probably always felt like maybe they were getting a second-rate experience. It's like, let's look after the guys who are there live. Let's really give them the experience. And then, okay, for everyone else, you can watch it on telly. And so I think at the end of the day, what we're really looking to try to do to build this out would be to try to make sure that all are getting a similar experience. Now, probably then what that lends itself to is obviously the website side of things has got to be important to be able to give a great experience on the web, but also something that we were doing pre-COVID is the mobile app. Now, mobile apps have been offering a digital experience at live events for years. They've been helping with pushing personalised recommendations as you're walking through the venues. But what we're probably seeing now is that you're going to be getting maybe a notification that Cameron wants to meet with you, and then realising that while I'm walking through the venue that Cameron's actually a digital attendee, but that doesn't matter because we can still meet. We can go and find a quiet space, and with the app, you can be sat there having a conversation with me while I'm at home. And I think that's what the main thing the technologies really have to do now is to bring everyone together. And we're all attendees. We're just consuming the content in different places. We might not be able to have that physical handshake. We can do everything digitally. And, in essence, we should be able to offer maybe a better experience digitally. We're all used to an on-demand economy now where we get pushed recommendations about things that we want to do. And that is easier in a digital world than it is in the live world. The live world can be really, really expensive with different sort of beacon and badge technology that have to locate you and knows what you're doing. Whereas on a website, we can easily change the content depending on your ticket type and who you are. But it's just mixing the two together to make sure that everyone's got a similar experience rather than saying, like I said, you're at home, so you're just watching things. You guys are there, you're actually engaged in it. But with the right technology, it's actually quite easy to replicate.
I wonder then if a roadblock in kind of this next step is going to be adoption, because I think event apps have been around for in terms of on-site apps where you can say here's your agenda, here's an attendee list where you can network and arrange, or we'll meet at this stand or whatever. But I think that there's a lot of great options out there, but I think the issue has always been is that how do people on site actually use them, right? So, I mean, is it kind of going to be a natural progression, you think, that because we've been through the pandemic, that everyone's a bit more digitally native now? Or do you think that there are steps that need to be taken to say, this is how you get people to actually uptake the technology that you're investing in as an organizer?
Yeah, well, first things first is you need to make it valuable to them.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, with a lot of the apps that are out there, they've typically been sort of a digital version of the paper-based guide. Okay, instead of carrying around my book, I'm going to go into my app and go through it. But you want to make it really, really valuable. You want it to offer up the right things. And like I said, it can be expensive at times, but in an ideal world, we're going through and it's recommending that you go and see this person, or that this session is starting, and based on what you've done before, you should be going off to it. And then in the same way, if we're offering the same type of thing to those attendees that are consuming the content on the website, and I'm in that website, or I'm there attending it live, and I'm looking at the Q&A, for example, and I see that Cameron's asked a really interesting question, and actually I have a similar interest to Cameron, and I can click onto Cameron and I can send him a push notification that says, really interesting question there, I think we should have a chat. Then that's where it's offering more value. And certainly on the app side of things, like I said, if it's just here's your agenda, but on a mobile app, it's not probably offering enough value to make it attendees actually want to download it. So it's got to offer up a lot more than that.
Yeah, certainly makes sense. I mean, I guess, are there certain different technologies that appeal to different, I guess, segments of an audience? So, I mean, we can talk about the app as attendee experience, but how do you hybridize the experience for an exhibitor on site, for example? So I know that during the pandemic and during virtual events, so you would have a virtual booth. Again, how do you make that valuable? How do you hybridize that experience for an exhibitor?
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, one of the things is obviously you're going to go down the route of just having your live booth. And the live booth might be, as we discussed before, it's right, okay, let's get a bit of footfall, let's grab people. And also let's try and organise some of these meetings beforehand and have people that are there face to face. What a lot of the time we're sort of witnessing is that we'll have our sales team live on the booth, but we'll also have the digital guys as well. And of course, with the digital side of things, yes, you can be having these digital meetings, but it can just, there's nothing to say that it has to happen within that day of the event. I mean, what we're certainly recognizing is that these events can be left open a lot longer in a digital world. We've got some clients of ours that have essentially had an event, but then just kept the website and everything running for a large period of time. And as long as that website then is offering up regular content, giving the attendees a reason to come back to it, then I might be, again, looking through something and there can be an attendee list on there. And we could have, for example, again, you know, okay, oh, actually Cameron's online. It can show who else is actually active within there at that time. And I'm maybe an exhibitor and I'm going back to my website regularly and I can see that Cameron's online and maybe he's looking at some of our content. Let's reach out to him now and see if we can schedule a meeting. A bit like a lot of chatbots do on specific websites where it's like, I can see you're there now. Have you got any questions? Essentially the same type of thing could be for like an exhibitor booth, but for a digital exhibitor booth. So we've got our live ones that we're doing for those day or so, but then we can continue that throughout a longer period of time by just keeping everything open for a longer period of time.
My question off the back of that would be, I guess, what's the life cycle of that? Because I think kind of the buzzword of the day, or one of them at least, would be kind of the omni-channel approach, where you basically have an event that's 365. You do what you're saying, where you keep open a website that has networking and content on it the whole year, and then your event is just part of that holistic experience. But I wonder, in your experience, what's kind of the I guess the longevity of that post-event push, and what lives longer? You know, is it a case of, you know, you can keep content on that website, people keep coming back to it after a month or 3, or is it that the networking is actually the thing that has the most stick? I mean, what stays around the longest, I guess? Well,
I think it really depends on, at the end of the day, how much content you've got to keep refreshing. It's a bit like any website and any blog. You know, the reasons why almost blogging on websites started was because it gave people a reason to come back to it. And that was optimized by Google, and it helped a lot with regard to the SEO side of things. And exactly the same way, if it's going to be static and there's not a lot else on there, then it's going to start to die a death. But it's probably, you know, I quite like the idea of this sort of hybrid event portfolio. We've got our main two physical events maybe that are happening once every 6 months. In between that, we are also running a number of, whether or not they're webinars or smaller events with a bit of networking side of things. And just that website can then become a year-long website that's open, or a year-long event that's open, and we're teasing up to the bigger event. We're giving everyone a great experience throughout. We're making sure that the exhibitors can push their message across to try to make sure that when attendees are there, they're actually interested in something what they're discussing. I mean, certainly I think one maybe that's been quite difficult at the moment is the networking side. To actually encourage people to network continuously throughout the year has maybe been quite a tough thing to do. But like I said, if we can try to encourage things like Q&A as it's going on, you start to recognize people that have similar interests. You start to maybe invite them into individual meetings, which can turn into not so much individual meetings, but individual breakout rooms. And then you start to, on a data perspective, really begin to build out a list of individuals that have interest in specific topics that when it comes maybe to the live event can actually get together and meet, or maybe even be offered out to the sponsors, to an exhibitor that is talking about their area of interest to actually engage with.
I wonder what your opinion is on, obviously it's great to have the kind of this networking, this dedicated networking platform and that is about a very specific topic and that you can share interest on and you can watch their content, etc. But how does that measure up to social media? So LinkedIn, for example, is obviously a professional platform who are also investing in event technology, by the way. And why? I guess what's the pitch to say, no, you should be looking up our event website to network on this level rather than just connect with them on LinkedIn and then say, hey, do you want to meet up at the show on that platform? How do you kind of cross that bridge?
Yeah, I suppose it's probably the data side of it. So, without knowing too much about what LinkedIn are going to do, I'd be interested to know whether or not they can actually spill out any data that says, these guys are specifically interested in this topic, and from there. And certainly when you look at the event technology side of things, what you're really beginning to know is all the different touch points. Okay, who they've visited, who they've seen, who they've networked with, what areas of interest there were for them. And when you get that data, you're really beginning to get a huge amount of valuable data that not only enhances the event organizer in terms of how they can improve on the event, certainly how they can personalize the experience for that attendee when they're coming in next. So we'll walk in. I mean, I remember years and years ago sitting down with someone from a really large event, and their general manager basically said to me, what I want from this event, and this is a big, big global event, is I don't want my attendees to have to make a choice. I want them to walk in and for the app or whatever it might be to tell them where they want to be and what they should be doing and who they should be seeing. I don't want to have them make a choice. And I think that's where maybe the pitch could be, is you can offer up exactly what they want rather than to have to spend maybe half a day wandering around wondering if I'm seeing the right stuff.
Makes sense. I mean, maybe it might be getting a bit into the nitty gritty of how the technology works to do that, but it sounds like it would involve some sort of machine learning or big data solution to say this person has been on our website and they've looked at this topic. I know that therefore when they turn up at the show, this show is tagged with this talk is tagged with one of the topics they looked at. The app will recommend that to them. Is that sort of how that works? And if so, I mean, that's obviously a lot of investment, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, look, it can be complex or it can be a bit simple. There's simple tagging type things, which basically says that Cameron's looked at this, we tag him with that, and we can offer him up X. But there can be a lot more complex and a lot more costly versions of doing it. It really does depend on what the needs are and what the requirements are. But actually, in a simplistic way, it's easy to offer up personalized content, just depending on maybe even a ticket type. Or, for example, we can even go down the route quite easily and say that because this person has registered for this session about X, show them content about Y.
Yeah.
Without having to have machine learning or AI or beacon and a badge technology, without any of that. But you could go, a lot deeper and a lot more costly into it.
Yeah, that's why I kind of preface my question without going down the rabbit hole of what is machine learning. Oh God, are the AIs taking over?
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, it really simple tagging can offer up that type of thing. But at the end of the day, the data that you can capture doesn't have to even relate back to personalizing the event. It just can relate back to your own sort of marketing strategy about what we're going to engage the attendees with post-event, and just knowing what they looked at, what they saw, what they got involved with would obviously help support that.
I have a slightly tangential question, but it's because you mentioned data, and it's a question that I've asked a lot of organisers, but I suppose it would be interesting to hear your perspective as kind of on the technology side, is when you collect that data about this person likes this attendee is coming, they work here, they're connected to this person. Who has the ownership of that data, and who has it now, and maybe who should? Obviously, we speak to a lot of organisers, so maybe the answer is a bit biased because they say we want it. But I mean, in your opinion, where does it best sit?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's the different side of things you can put in with regard to the terms, and we have a lot of that anyway. But typically with ours, it's owned by the event organizer. That's who basically has it. But of course, when anyone's joining our events or the events that are run by us, all of our clients can set up specific terms that talks about what they're actually doing with the data, who owns it, etc., and that can all be accepted. I mean, there's plenty of different caveats around sort of GDPR and whether or not you're opting into the networking and different types of things that to allow for that.
And typically, do you find that clients, when they're setting up those terms, they want kind of exclusive rights to the data, or are they more sort of willing to share?
I'll be honest with you. I've probably not looked into the actual terms that our clients are putting in, just because it's something I wouldn't have done. But it would be an interesting to see some stats on it.
So, I mean, we've got a couple of minutes until we sort of start the Q&A segment. So we'll open up to the massively broad question I have to finish, which is, I guess, what's the next big step for hybrid events? I mean, we've talked a lot about having a kind of 365 approach to an event, and rather than an event being a once a year thing that you then leave alone for 10 months and then market for a little bit, it being a constant presence. Is that the next big thing? Or is there a specific technology that you think is going to be a real game changer? I mean, what's the next big step?
I think the main thing is going to determine it is adoption. Is it something people are interested in? Like I said, we've certainly experienced that our clients are keen to stick with it and keen to carry on working with it, but adoption is going to be the main thing. If no one's interested, it won't continue. I certainly feel that it is, like I said, making sure that whoever is consuming things in the virtual world isn't getting a second-rate experience, is actually there, is getting a really, really good experience. I think that's going to be the main thing. But like I say, I mean, what we've probably learned over the last 18 months is that it's really, really difficult at the moment to predict the future and see what's happening. And I think there's maybe an opportunity to go in and define it. But if everything changed tomorrow and there was no further, COVID disappeared, it'll be really interesting to see whether everyone just went, you know what, we'll go back to exactly how we were before. And like I said, I haven't got an answer to that, but it'll be really interesting to see what would happen.
Just, I guess, without you calling out the entire industry, but I mean, from your perspective, you say that adoption is going to be a very big thing, and that the key to that is making sure that virtual attendees don't have a second-rate experience. I mean, where does the industry, do you think, sit, maybe as a collective, on that note now? I mean, are you typically finding that at a lot of hybrid events, that the virtual is sort of, the ugly child at the moment, or is it getting better?
Well, I think it's really difficult at the moment because I don't think we've had enough physical events with just the sort of the virtual side of things to gauge that. I think what's happened at the moment is we're probably still in the boat of most events are more or less virtual. And from what I've seen, from many different platforms, they've all been pretty good. I think what you will start to find is maybe that they need to be a bit more on brand. One of the things we quite often pride ourselves with is that if you went to one of our events on the website, you wouldn't necessarily quickly say, oh, that's just another EventsCase run event. It would be very much on brand. And I think a lot of organizations want to have that ownership, want to make it fully on brand. And certainly at the moment, maybe some of the digital side of things has got a very similar sort of look and feel, and doing something slightly different might become something that we need to do as an industry. But again, I don't know whether or not we've had enough experience of what will be a fully sort of hybrid world just yet.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think now we can move on to some Q&A. Got a couple of questions here already. Just a reminder to anyone watching, right-hand side of your screen, Q&A. You can add Q&A in there, and I'll put it to Kevin. But we've got a couple in here. One of which is pretty simply, what about blockchain? I think I'll try and expand upon that one a little bit. Which is, I've done a couple of interviews on this as well. So blockchain is obviously something that can be used to create a ledger, to track payments and etc. Is that something that feeds into the hybrid model, or is that something you think will help adoption for organisers, in that you can say you track data for attendees and exhibitors, but you can also implement a blockchain technology to track your payments and where it's coming from, and ensure that you're being compliant with any internal policies in that way? Is that something that you guys have explored, or you think it's bigger in space?
We haven't as yet. I mean, I follow it in a way, but probably don't have enough experience to comment on it. I certainly know of people that could. You've probably interviewed the same people, but yeah, I by no means am an expert on that. It's not something necessarily we've discussed too much. Fair
enough. All right, got another one here. If there's difference, I guess in your experience, I mean, is there a difference between, hybridizing a big corporate conference and maybe a smaller meeting? What is more appropriate on that level? Is there a space to move into for smaller meetings to say we'll have maybe the UK based people in the room, and then we'll hybridize and have we'll have international offices calling in? And is that going to require a platform, a dedicated kind of hybrid platform for that, or is that the case of it's fairly sort of everyday?
Yeah. Cool. Well, actually, we've recognised this quite a bit, because I think some of our events that we've run previously would be run as meetings. And actually we've even gone down the route of running some of our own company meetings on our platform, where typically it would be Zoom or Google Meet. Now, of course, what it does offer is the ability for registration that isn't just click here and accept the meeting that you're going to have with everyone else, but what would you want to hear about? What's of interest to you? Ask your questions prior to actually joining it. And I actually think it's a really good way of looking at things. And I'm sure there's lots of organizations that have done it this way before, but we are finding that there are a number of our clients now that are using our platform just for internal events, where they might either get teams of people together, or everyone's in the virtual world, where they can have their Q&A running, they can have their reg and get their questions up beforehand, they can ask people to go into different breakout rooms to sit down and discuss different things. And yes, some of that can be done on Zoom, but again, it just offers that sort of fully on-brand experience. I mean, we're even sort of seeing some clients even doing things like, well, actually, we might even run our sort of SaaS sales presentations via a type of platform where, again, we can get people to register. We can get maybe a group of people that might know each other into a room to discuss these specific topics. So certainly we all think about this being just large events, but lots of organizations just with internal teams are utilizing the type of technology that we have to run their internal meetings more as events.
I actually have a question off the back of that, and it comes off of I hosted a roundtable about hybrid events, and one of the big things that came up was having very bespoke platforms versus something a bit more standardized. So in the example you're talking about, if you're doing it for a massive conference where you have a budget of X amount of £1 million or whatever, then you can maybe justify having a really bespoke platform. But for a smaller meeting, or maybe you're like a mid-sized company and you want to do it on the platform, maybe a standardized approach is a bit better. I mean, what's your opinions on that? Is it going to kind of be a case of Bespoke is always going to give you a better return, or are you finding that maybe a bit more of a standardized approach it's picking up some steam?
Well, I mean, look, I mean, first things first, we are one of a platform that's fairly flexible in terms of the costing. So we've got a lot of clients that can come to us, and for a really affordable way, they can build out something that is on brand, that offers a great experience. Certainly, you know, there was probably at the very beginning that cost would be a factor, and it's like, well, actually, we've already, as an organisation, as an enterprise, invested into Zoom, and we'll do everything on Zoom. But that's probably changed a bit now, mainly because, like I said, there's the whole, okay, it's another Zoom meeting, and we're back to back on Zoom meetings. So offering something that's just here's our fully on brand area where we go and have our internal meetings has worked quite well for a number of our clients.
I think I've got another question here, which is kind of comparing the virtual and physical experiences, and I'll rephrase it slightly, and I'll put my own experience in there as well. So when we went to International CONFEX a couple of weeks ago, the amount of times I heard, "It's so nice to talk to you," without a little Zoom box around your head, you think it was the catchphrase of the show. I mean, do you think that now we're going back to live, that there will be a lull in demand for kind of that virtual side, and then it will spike back up? I know that you say you don't have a crystal ball, so it's very difficult to predict these things. But I mean, do you think this is a kind of a temporary kind of negative feeling around the virtual side, or do you think that that's here to stay now that we've all been in the pandemic for so long? What's your thoughts on kind of that likability side of it?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it probably depends on where you sat beforehand.
Yeah.
If you were one of those people that sat there beforehand that was like, I really don't want to go and do things, then it might go back. But I certainly get that. I mean, how nice it is to actually go and speak to people now. It is. It's nice. It's I actually called it before it's changed, but I thought pre-COVID that COVID would be the death of the handshake, and you wouldn't be seeing anyone sort of shaking hands again. And you still see some people that be like, well, should I or shouldn't I? Look, that's going to completely depend on mentality. If you were there beforehand and you actually loved seeing people face to face and you wanted to get into it and you go back, then you might even find there are people now that hated it beforehand that love it now, and vice versa. But I think it's really, really difficult to tell. What I will say is that there's surely got to be an appetite for keeping some sort of virtual side of things, if anything, just for the fact that we've reached out to a wider audience. And, you know, I'm no event organizer. I'm from the technology side, but I sort of think if I had 200 people in a room over 2 days, or the option of having 200 people in a room and another 20,000 engaging with over the next 6 months, I know what I'd choose to do. And it probably wouldn't be going straight back to just saying, here's only 200 people and the rest of you, you know, forget about it. So surely that's got to come to everyone's thoughts when we're thinking about how we want to continue with some sort of virtual aspect.
We've got another question here, and I guess, as you were just saying, on the technology side, so maybe this is more about what clients are coming to you. So in your experience with clients, what sectors are returning to or adopting hybrid more, and what sectors are kind of keener to return to live? And does a global audience versus a UK only audience have an effect on this in your experience?
Well, I think travel is going to have a massive effect on it anyway. And really, when you look at it, there's surely it's made the whole world sit up and think about sustainability, you know, and the impact we're all having on the environment by traveling around everywhere. I think there's surely got to be a lot of organizations that maybe are even doing things like cutting back on the costs of travel based on this. So I think that's got to have a big impact. Probably a lot of the technology that was in place at the beginning of COVID wasn't quite set up to manage different global audiences at different times, whereas that's changed now, so that will allow it all to filter in. In terms of the different sectors, well, we certainly saw quite a big take up on tech for corporates with internal teams, but that's mainly because they wanted to get their internal teams together and there was no other way of doing things. So what we're seeing in return to the physical side of things is probably a lot of the events that were physical beforehand. And we were running this physically. We always have done for the past 20 odd years, and we want to do it again. The virtual and the hybrid side of things, a lot of it has just been brand new events. So brand new stuff that maybe didn't exist before, and sort of adding to the portfolio. But in terms of industry sectors, I think it's quite tough to say.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good point to end on there. We've run over by 1 minute, so that shows how sparkling our conversation has been. I want to thank everybody who has joined here today for watching. If you want to find out more about what the guys over at EventsCase are doing, you can visit eventscase.com. And if you want to read more about the events industry, you can visit m.i.c.e.com. But plug over. Thank you very much, Kevin, for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and I've certainly learnt a lot. But as for now, I'll see you all next time.